Here's
Hi
the
JB,
guy. Hey, hello.
how how you doing?
Great. And you?
Excellent. Yeah, very well, thank you. Very, very well. How's beautiful Nice?
Very
Beautiful.
beautiful these days. We are super lucky to be locked at home in such a part of the world. Definitely.
Absolutely. So what's the situation like in France at the minute?
Strange.
Full. Yeah.
Strange.
Yeah.
It's well, if it's a really big chaos health-wise.
Hmm.
Um, my neighbor is just living up there. She's a nurse at the emergency unit in charge of COVID patients, and
Well,
yeah, it's going big. So we try to do our best to help with healthy behavior,
yeah.
just holding
Yeah.
the kids, staying home, and that's the best we can do.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we've got some questions to run through, which is great. So there's been plenty of interest. So we've got quite a few questions from people on Twitter and people on Instagram. But before that, there's a few things we're going to discuss before we get to the questions. All came in absolute schoolboy error. I've still got you, JB.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, mate. A phone call came in, so need to get rid of that. So yeah, so a couple of questions that we want to, a couple of discussion points we want to cover before we get to the questions. But if anyone does have any additional questions, just pop them in the chat and we can get to them when we've got time. So first of all, one thing you mentioned to me earlier on was basically around the information we can get from standardized jump testing and the certain correlations that have been drawn from sprinting. So the question to you: can we get good information on sprint capability from standard jump testing?
Well, the question for me is not can we, is should we.
Okay.
Basically, it's I understand the philosophy of testing jump, whatever, to better interpret, understand, monitor, anticipate sprint performance. But my point is, it should be very, very highly justified. Otherwise, sprint. It's an indirect estimation of a task that should be very natural for anybody. And yes, there's a correlation, but very, very typically, if you have a group and you have a zero point 0.6 correlation between jump height or jump power and their sprint performance, zero point 0.6 correlation means the R square is going to be 0.36. So it means that 36% of the inter-subject variance in one is associated to the other one.
Okay.
So it's like using a lens that only gives you 36% of the story to see the story. And my point is, why would you use that lens and not just ask for a sprint test? So it's a way to go around sprinting and go around doing sprint tests. I can understand you have some time in the year, some people, some athletes where you don't want to do a sprint test, but basically the information is very poor, and I think the culture should change so that to better understand sprinting, we are going to do sprint tests. Now take the philosophy the opposite way. You would never do a sprint test to know about your basketball player jump height capability. It wouldn't make sense.
Yeah.
Why would the opposite make sense? This is something we need to understand. Of course, there's going to be correlation, but I always joke with my friends or students, like, maybe there's also going to be a correlation with the bench press 1RM and the sprint performance. So
Okay.
0.06, what are you going to
Yeah.
do? Are you going to use
Yeah.
the bench press? And no. So the entire philosophy of trying to go around sprinting should be I think avoided.
So are people doing that, JB, just because of ease in the field?
Well, it's of course it's easier to do a jump test on a jump mat or to hit this magic machine, the Vertec and so on.
Yeah.
Yes, it's easier, but it's also because it's less demanding.
Yeah.
There's less there's less risk, because if your guys never sprint, maybe they're going to be injured in a sprint test, and that's an issue for your ass. Oh, can we say that on the Instagram live
Say whatever
chat?
you want, mate.
No, it's. I understand the context where you don't want people to ruin their muscles and health in sprinting, so you have to avoid it. But that's the culture that needs to change. And jump height is very, very indirect indicator of what is sprinting.
Mm-hmm. So what is the aim of those studies that have then been transferred to practice? Is that okay?
No, the aim is to provide some indicators related to sprint performance. But if you take that at the individual level, if you train a football player and they improve their jump height by, I don't know, 10%, do you interpret that as they are going to improve their sprint performance by, I don't know, X%? It's practically speaking, it's not very useful. So I don't see any. The big issue is whatever the research correlation, and there's been thousands of studies relating one to the other, fine. My point is, how can you use that in practice? Will you monitor jump height over the season in your track and field guys or in your rugby backs? Not sure. And I'm lucky enough to speak almost every day now with high-level people, elite people. We never have this kind of discussion. No, really, we never have this kind of discussion. So that's the gap between research and practice. Should also have more researchers really talking with practitioners, not just to talk and not just to say this is the science and you need to apply it. Also to listen and say, okay, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Why are you not doing that? You see what I mean? So it's a much bigger question than we think.
It's interesting because I was actually going through some of the podcasts and some of the transcripts, and yours was one from our first chat, which was probably maybe 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago, and that was actually one of the talking points that you spoke about, was the gap between research and practice. So has that improved since back then, or is that still an issue?
Yes and no. We cannot have a black view of things here. Yes, it has improved, definitely. It has improved, and your work in that LA is key for that, for example. But there are still some ivory towers, like this is our results, and we don't really care how much you're going to implement that, and if you are going to implement that. And on the other side, there's practitioners seeing things, dealing with hundreds and hundreds of athletes, having their own field knowledge, and this knowledge is totally in contrast with what they read in randomized control trials and what they see in meta-analysis. And this is an issue because it's not a matter of who is right and who is wrong. It's just a matter of why some things that totally make sense in practice have never been proven or even tested by randomized control trials. First question. And the second question is, why do things that make sense in the RCTs and in the meta-analysis are never done and tested and make no sense in practice? If you honestly face these two questions, whoever you are, I think you're moving one step forward. Clearly.
Is it from a researcher point of view? How easy or hard is it? And I guess this is different for every coach, every researcher. But is the geographical logistical gap making that the research to practice gap tough to bridge?
What is for you a geographical gap? What do you mean there?
I don't know, you in Nice getting in touch with, I don't know, a high-level coach in Phoenix. Or, I don't know, I'm just thinking of reasons why that may not be happening.
So, in my opinion, geographical is not an excuse. And I can tell you that because in the last 3 weeks, I've been in touch with more staffs, from the place I'm talking now, than in the last maybe year. So, no, it's just a matter of trying to understand the other's point of view and the other's arguments. So, for example, if I don't want to take that hot topic as an example every time, but if you talk hamstring injuries with 10 elite coaches, like people who have coached hundreds and hundreds of sprinters in their life and hundreds of fast moving people, you talk about that with them and you listen to them and they say, well, this worked, this was dangerous, this didn't work. It's super interesting. And it's much more, or it's very complementary with what the current state of knowledge is, because we always say science is just something that catches up with practical knowledge with 10 to 20 years, of delay. But sometimes practice is totally wrong.
Yeah.
But sometimes it makes sense. My point is, we should focus more on things that make sense in research or in practice, whoever we are.
So it seems it seems so simple that researchers would get that input from the practitioners.
It should. It should. But it's the big issue is I think it's an issue of time and personal. How can I say that? Mindset.
Okay.
I always tell, when I discuss that with my colleagues, academics in France, very often I say, one issue with researchers is that they think that when their stuff is on PubMed, it's over.
Done. Job
it's
done.
it's the end of their job.
Yeah.
I was like that, I think, sometimes at the beginning of my career, because you need, for your CV, for a position, you need to publish or perish. Okay. But my opinion is that when your stuff is on PubMed, the job begins. Because the job that begins is the next hypothesis. Maybe it's criticizing or maybe going back on that first hypothesis with new data. And it's taking that result down in the trenches. And if you think that because you're a researcher or X or Y PhD prof and you're on PubMed, people have to come and take your knowledge, it doesn't work like that. Even academics and students don't do it most of the time. So don't expect, I'm not criticizing them. They have full-time job there. So don't expect them. You have to move one step and everybody should meet halfway. You see what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So that's part of the issue. That's part of the issue. In some other countries, one big part of the issue is the language. I very often have some physiotherapists, pretty old school, telling me, well, this is English science. This is science written in English. I only read the science that's written in French. And I say, wow, that's reality. That's reality.
That's an interesting point, actually. And this is, again, I was going through the transcripts of Martin Bescheid's a podcast back in probably 3 years ago. And he spoke about exactly that. Those that are not English speaking, how essential it is to speak English. But even still, that people are staying strong, that they don't have to. And it's just, reading research in Spanish or their own language in French.
I think it's changing now with the new generations and the big, huge work done by guys like you, Jan Lemmer, the visualization and connecting to research. But I always say, if research was in our mother tongue, the transfer would be much easier, because after all, a research paper, the content itself is not that complex to read. To understand most of the time in sports sciences. So yes, of course, it's if you figure out one day, Roger Cram, I love this. It's a professor in human locomotion in Colorado, and one day I was there visiting, or no, he was in Saint Etienne with us visiting. I remember the red wine now, and and after a few glasses, he just stepped back like that. He looked at us and he says, "Wow, I only realize now how difficult my work as an academic would be if I had to write and read research in French." He's from Colorado. Okay.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a huge barrier, huge. But it's the game. I think that's something that also Martin. That's the game. So it's a rule of the game.
Yeah, yeah. So the last thing we wanted to go through, or last one of the things before we get onto some of the questions, the overemphasis on acute studies when we actually want training effect, not acute effect. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that?
Yeah, I don't know if it's an overemphasis, but I think the issue is that we should not we should not extrapolate the results of an acute study. Acute means we do something and we see what happens right now during that session, during that movement. And we extrapolate the conclusions on what would happen if we did a training program like this. So I will take two examples, one in physiology with altitude. There's debate on that, whatever, but overall, altitude is an interesting stimulus, okay, to develop the physiological capacities overall. But when you're at altitude and you perform, your performance is bad. Your performance is lower than normal, okay, because it's limiting your performance. So if you just do an acute study on, I don't know, repeated sprints or long distance runs, whatever, you will say, wow, altitude is altering performance. We don't want that. Nobody would conclude that. So now I will take the second example with, for example, resisted sprints or resistance training. Anytime you push or you pull something heavy, your motion, whatever it is, a jump, a sprint, your motion is slower. That's physiology. It's normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But because when you do that, your motion is slower, this is acute effect. We should not extrapolate that to the training and say, if you do that repeatedly over time, your normal movement will be slower. It doesn't make sense. Like every athlete who goes to the gym to improve sprint performance, what do? They push heavy, slowly, because they anticipate that it's going to make them faster, which is the case sometimes. Okay? So it makes sense. Now, if you pull a heavy sled or a high resistance, of course, you will run slow. That's the objective. The objective is to overload your system so that maybe later when it's free to run, it's going to run faster. So here we have acute effect of something versus training effect. And the big danger, it's not a danger, it's a just interpretation of research. When you have an acute study, you have an acute result. Mm-hmm. And there's no way you can extrapolate that to training effects. You need training studies.
So is that just from a practitioner point of view? Is that just poor understanding of the research?
You know, I don't think practitioners misinterpret or misunderstand acute studies. They know that temporarily we alter performance so that there's an adaptation effect and we have better performance. That's the objective of training. So I don't think it's an issue with practitioners. It's very often an issue with the conclusions of research.
Okay.
You know, and it's much easier to do a cross-sectional study, so it's a one-shot or a 2 sessions, rather than doing a controlled group training. Like especially right now, I want to say hello and all the best to all my colleagues in the world who were actually doing a training or 2 training studies when the COVID outbreak started, because everything almost is ruined.
Yes.
And so, yes, it's complicated to do a training study.
Who was it in Australia that you've got? Have you got him in Australia?
Now,
any of you guys?
I have 2 guys. One is in Finland right now, Johan Lati. He's doing a season follow-up with the players there. And the other one is doing a rehab trial in Dublin, in the sports surgery clinic.
Okay.
So, and another one is in a pro rugby club in France. And we were doing a season follow-up of physical capabilities, and boom, we will have a 10-month follow-up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's okay. There's much worse in life. I know but when it's your PhD and it's tough. But we were tackling the challenge of doing long-term monitoring, big studies. Of course, if you do a cross-sectional trial, then okay, you have 2 or 3 days and repeat it 2 or 3 days, and that's done. And you need both. But we must admit that some studies are easier to run than others.
And last one on the list from ours, rather than before we get onto the questions, was an interesting one that you posed earlier on, which was laziness. Bit of a frustration there for you?
Yeah.
Yeah. From
I,
who? From who, JB?
I see that. No, no, for everybody's lazy. I see that.
Okay.
I see that, for example, with my daughter.
Yeah.
She has mathematics. She's 10. Okay, so she next year she's going to be in sixth grade. She has mathematics exercises. They are absolutely not complex. They take time. Like I give you an example. You just put every number with a 2 and a 7 from 0 to 7,000. List them all. There's nothing easier. It's super easy. You just go.
Yeah.
That's just putting hours, putting minutes. So you just go, you say, okay, 2, 7,
Yeah.
27, 72, 77. That's it. You do an entire list. And the time you take to complain is the time the exercise actually needs to be completed. So what I want to stress there is that I feel that many students, maybe some colleagues, maybe myself, very often we think something is complex, it's out of our range of possibility. In fact, this thing is long to do. It takes time. It's not complex. It's just long. Mm-hmm. So laziness is very often the explanation of some things that we see as flaws or limitations. Okay, it's just you see a graph with a bar and an SD, and we all know, we all agree there should be some individual points, and even the authors, when you tell them, yes, of course, we should. It's just they didn't take it takes, if you have 10 or 20 points, it takes 2 more hours. Mm-hmm. So it's a 2 hours difference. I always tell my students the difference between a good presentation and a great presentation is 20 hours. Mm-hmm. It's 20 hours of work that you put or not. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, except, situations, if you don't, it's just because you're lazy, not because you don't have the competence. A student told me one day, oh, prof, we don't know how to do that with PowerPoint because we were never taught that at the uni. And I said, man, I never had a PowerPoint lesson in my life. What did I do? I took every single freaking menu and every single freaking option to just see what happens.
Yeah.
It took me something like 200 hours, or I don't know, but I know this trick. He was like, whoa, what's a trick? No. It's just
no trick. Just put the time
no
in.
trick. So there's a very famous Belgian singer. He sings in French. His name is Jacques Brel. I love this guy. And he says in an interview one day, most people who are dumb are in fact not dumb. They are just lazy. And I love this sentence because it means, just put the word that needs to be put in.
I know there's a couple of students on here now, so they can hear they can hear you. But is that, in terms of your experience with students, is that changed over time, or is that trait? Not to say it's just your students, but that's probably an easy one to reference. But is that changed over time, or has that always been there?
I try to make sure it doesn't change with my students. I don't like to say my students, but the students I work with.
Of course, yeah.
And I would say that the top 5%, I've been in the game for almost 20 years now, okay? So the top 5% of students are still about the same, big motors, big working load, big, great. But the bottom 95%, in my opinion, have changed a lot. Mm-hmm. I've changed a lot because they just, I don't blame them, but they just have more things to divide their mindset and to divide their mental energy
attention
on. Yeah. That's it. And I can tell you that if when I was in master's or PhD back in the time, I don't know if with Twitter, Instagram, and all that stuff, Netflix, I don't know if I would have done the same things. Definitely. I will always, I went to Italy 6 months during my PhD. We were in a house, and basically it was a remote place, rainy place. The only thing to do was just working and processing data, and that's where we generated some very cool models. And I love the ability of getting bored to foster things. we've been in lockdown for 3 weeks now. My kids spend 3 hours a day in the tree that you see here.
Yeah, nice.
They never looked at that tree before. Now it's there. They want to live there just because they have nothing else to do,
Mhm.
and they're super happy.
Yeah. Yeah, there is. I mean, it's obviously a horrendous situation, but there are nuggets of positivity that can come out of it. The tree, working the tree, definitely is one of them by the sounds of it. And there's
Yeah,
many
yeah,
more,
yeah,
of course. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I don't know if it was with you or somebody else, but recently no, it was with Scott Livingston. We had a podcast about life
Yeah.
more than work, and I said
Yes.
I spent all my 10 to 15 years playing in a dump in my village
Yeah.
because there were so many cool things to
Mhm.
experiment and do.
Yeah.
Okay, and
Yeah.
I think this is very, very interesting, very important. Screens for kids. Wow,
Mhm.
seeing kids playing in a dump on Facebook versus actually yourself really playing in that dump. Man,
Mhm. Do you know what? Do you know when your podcast's out with Scott? I'm
uh,
jumping on with him next week. Actually, he
yeah,
kindly spoke to me yesterday evening, so we're
yeah,
going to jump on. But do you know when yours is out?
I think it's going to be during or after the summer.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. Are you all right to go through some questions
yeah,
that
yeah,
people have
sure.
asked?
Yeah,
Is that all right? So we'll start with one that came in. Did I write who it was from? Maybe not. So motive. So this is a quote from Jordan, the Mendeguccia, who came on the pod. So thank you for the introduction there, by the way. Mode of contraction is not the most important thing for hamstring training and prevention. It's more of a question of time under tension and velocity of the exercise. What is the practical application from your point of view, JB, of that sentence in terms of prevention and rehab?
well, I don't. I think people should go and read the entire interview. I think it was on Simply Faster
Okay.
recently. So
Yeah.
that's great interview by
Yes.
Jordan.
Yes.
Uh, the end of the sentence is interesting to me because time and attention. There's so many different things that come into play for hamstrings. That time and attention is just, I think, one item, and we don't know a lot about that. But velocity of motion is key because uh, when does hamstring injury occur? When there's a strain that's too high for the muscle to face, and the tissue basically breaks. Okay, let's summarize that. I think everybody agrees on that. It's a problem with strain that's too high. So you have two. It's a balance. Strain is a balance between, well, facing the strain is a balance between your muscle ability to face that strain and the strain itself. So if you want to prevent that, you can play on both levers. You can play on the muscle tissue, I'll say muscle tendon tissue capability to face that. So you can strengthen it. There's also maybe very likely an issue with the architecture of the entire stuff. There's a very underestimated issue of tendon tissue, how they interact with muscle. I advise everybody to listen to Keith Barr
Mhm.
podcast because you know, muscle tendon issues are maybe very often tendon issues that in fact impact the weakest link just connected to that. And if your muscle is too stiff, blah, blah, blah. And you can act on the other lever, which is strain. And you can try and modify the strain by modifying movement and by better adapting your body to respond to that strain. And uh, injuries very often occur in high contraction, let's say contraction, no, high movement contexts, not low movement context. So you have to be sure to match the specificity of the problem. I always take, if your car has an issue, like you have a wheel that does that only after 100 miles per hour, why would you try to analyze, fix anything at 20 miles per hour or less? You see what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I don't say you should not work on all this stuff. I just say you should also try and target the context of injury. And this is why I think running fast itself is an underestimated way to prevent everything. I know right now, as we speak, there's no clear science evidence at the top of the pyramid of the RCT and blah, blah, blah. But I also know that I never saw one practitioner telling me, well, the less we sprint, the less we have issues. No, you know,
Yeah.
so this is important. I think it's way more complex than the current state of the art, and that's why we need more research, and that's why also we need more research in new alleys. So doing a research in a new alley doesn't mean you think the other alley is a dead end.
Yeah.
It's a, you know, we have a very, very, for example, if you say I love that football team, by definition it means you hate this one. It's you know, it's a puzzle. It's not a coin that you flip. It's a puzzle that you try to build.
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, that's a response to that. I think yes, fast movement skills is very important because hamstring issues very often is a fast movement issue. Very
Cool.
often.
Just one's come through. I've just seen it. I'm guessing it's Paul on the Hit Science account, Martin, about your advice for a PhD student. So we'll just jump back to the previous discussion. Number one piece of advice.
Wow. Let me think. Well, number one piece of advice: try to embrace and know well, personally speaking, what you're going to study. Number one advice, because otherwise you will make mistakes. Clearly,
Yep.
it doesn't mean you will be very, very good because you know that and blah blah. But otherwise you will make mistake. Advice number two: spend hours. Spend hours. Read. You know, you have 3-4 years in your life where you should switch off. Sorry to say that, but you should switch off some buttons.
Yeah.
Social life in a way, family life in a way. But if you don't switch off buttons to switch on your PhD student button, you will not be the same PhD student. And it's a 3-year, 4-year investment. It's an investment because you know that there's having a PhD title and having a PhD title. It's not only, you know, it's not the diploma. It's what you are able to generate during that period and what will happen after. So I will say yes. Switch on, switch off what you need to. Focus and be ready to read and absorb. Because, you know, it's going to be your topic. Skills. The other skills, you know, learning to code, learning R, it's additional skills, in my opinion. It's not the core. It's not the core skill.
Cool. So next question from Damien Harper at York St John's, so not far from me.
Yeah.
Is there any future developments to be seen in sprint acceleration profiling / understanding the determinants of the sprint acceleration profile?
In our what I see coming is that mechanically speaking, the description of what happens as to the kinetics and the kinematics is now pretty thorough. The last studies by Steffi Collier on Ryu Nagahara just put some, you know, some data that are now totally, you cannot do more. It's force plate everywhere and 3D cameras all over the place. So we know what happens. I think the next improvements will come from muscle physiology and neurophysiology and tendon behavior during sprinting. And I need to repeat that, during sprinting. Maybe some of the listeners and you know that paper in Nature now, 2 years ago, I guess, where we see some portable tendon vibration based sensors to estimate muscle strain. And we see them applied at the Achilles tendon, biceps fem tendon, patella tendon. And I think it was back 2 years ago. So I think now the development must be almost ready to boom and to give us something to say, okay, wear that, calibrate it correctly, and you're going to have the muscle tendon and the muscle tendon behavior. That's the next step is a microscopic step, in my opinion. And I'm very, very excited to see that coming because, like, for example, ultrasound studies of muscle behavior in static versus dynamic versus running fast tasks, totally different stories, totally different words. So I hope the next steps are going to be microscopic, so we better know how everything goes. I advise everybody to read Andras Egge's PhD thesis. It's available on the net. And he just said, when I started to try and figure out what was happening at the muscle level with ultrasonography in running, my PhD plan was dead within 1 month. Preliminary study, preliminary data, and we said, okay, let's focus on something else. So, yeah.
So how do you spell his surname? Because I know it's not the easiest to spell.
What, Andras?
Yes. What's his surname?
Egge. Well, maybe that's how I call him, Andras Egge, and maybe he can drop something and spelling it correctly, but he never corrected me. So
yeah, no, that's cool.
Yeah.
Just looking through there. Okay, so next one, and this has come up twice actually. One from Stu Marshall and one from Josh Darrell Jones. So in a roundabout way, during this time of reduced facilities, if an athlete is able to do heavy accels, would this be able to maintain? Would this maintain their max velocity capabilities?
Right now, you mean in this context? That's the question.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it could be any context, but I suppose now is an interesting one given the lack of facilities and whatnot.
You sent me that question this morning, and I ran this afternoon, and I thought about that.
Okay.
And I think, unfortunately, there's no way you can let's say simulate or stimulate the max speed conditions other than doing it. So my point is, because I currently do 1 session of sprint a week just for me, I do it because right in front of my house there's a little road that goes up, and I just go there and sprint. So I'm lucky enough to have 40, 50, 60 meters to do some sprints, and I think there's no alternative. But let's have the challenge. I would say try to find a bicycle, because in the fast movement of sprinting, you have 2 components. You have the velocity, you have the speed of motion, of displacement, but you have also the frequency of movement. And you can stimulate that by cycling in place. And you can also stimulate that by skipping and running in place. So I think, I don't know, there's no randomized control trial, etc. It's just my opinion, but if you're just at home and you want to stimulate your sprint Vmax in a way, do that. Do some 10 seconds all-out skipping frequency on place. If you have something, you can do some wall drills. You know that wall drill where you push, but you should try to respect that rule, be as frequent as possible, as quick as possible, because you will have this quick movement alternative.
So on the bike, low resistance, super high.
Yes, of course, yes. Low resistance, not too low, because the big issue is that if the resistance is too low, like you drop the chain, you're gonna be so ill at ease that
you're not
gonna be that fast. Yes. Yeah. When you try to go too fast by removing all resistances, you see that most people are not, in fact, faster than they were with a slight resistance. So with the device, yes.
Yeah.
With Pierre Samosino, the craziest thing we've seen my craziest thing in experimentations was Christophe Lemaitre. We had him on a cycling sprint test with a very low friction. He jumped on the bike, all set, boom, 205 RPMs. His max velocity. This guy is almost 2 meters high. Okay, so when you have a 1.93 meter high guy rotating the limbs at 205, That's some speed.
Yeah.
But it's an acute study. It's not because of that that he's fast on the track. But yes, if you have a bike, you should try to do that.
What happened to Christoph Metcher? Is he still on the circuit?
Yeah.
Okay.
He had big injuries issues in the last season,
Yeah.
so he was off the European Championships because he had a hamstring injury something like 1 month before or 6 weeks before.
Okay.
But now he's back in his objective was to run the 200 in the next Olympics. So I don't know how. I've not discussed yet with French staffs about how this 1 year shift in the Olympic Games will impact this type of guys because he's also getting older. So,
Of course.
yeah. But yes.
Okay. Sure, from Sean Seal. No, it's not. It's from Ryan Alcantara. Do you know if hamstring injuries occur more on straight versus the curve of the track for any track guys out there? Is there anything out there in terms of that?
Versus the curve, you mean? Yes.
Yes. Yeah,
So my impression from what I follow and what I read is that it happens more in the straight.
Okay.
I mean, relatively speaking, we don't talk in total volume because, of course, there's more straight line races and so on than curves. But in relative numbers, I've asked confirmation to Pascal Edward, my close colleague, is writing some epidemiology studies in BGSM and so on the athletics injuries. And he told me that basically if you add the 200 and the 400, it's about 20% of all hamstring injuries in athletics. So that tends to confirm. And but then do straight line sprinters get injured when they do some curve training for whatever reason? I don't have some data on that, but my feeling is that most of the time it occurs in straight line because it's high speed. And in team sport, we are thinking about the fact with Jordan that hamstring injuries occur when there's high speed and some kind of trunk, shoulder perturbation. Sometimes the player is alone and nothing changes and bam. But very, very often there's always something around, like, this type of rotation, an opponent bringing the trunk to tilt and but you don't see a red flag on the TV screen when the exact moment of the muscle snap occurs.
Yeah.
So it's just pure, it's okay to do that. Just try and scratch your head and think further because it will generate ideas. I love the editorial by Walter Herzog in Human Movement Studies special number on hamstrings. He said, we don't really know a lot about the causes. And, Walter Herzog is the boss. And he says, maybe there's something where our system, neuromuscular system, goes out of control. And maybe the injury is a moment where there has been a lack of control. So if I say that, people will jump at me like, where is the evidence? But if Walter Herzog says that, it's that, guys, maybe this makes sense after all. So yes, yes, we don't know everything.
Okay, cool. So this is an interesting one. So top of the list that I sent you. So a player comes, I said, I'm guessing like maybe a team sport player as an example to give some context. A player comes up and says, I want to get faster. The question was, what can I do? I think what may be interesting would be what would be the first thing you'd try to tackle? What would be the first task?
Well, if it comes to me, the first thing is I will say, okay, go and see this other guy, like a good coach, of course. But if I have to put my coach cap again, the first thing I will ask him to do is just to run in front of me, and then a couple of times, slow, middle, fast, just to see how his body moves and to see how he contacts the ground, how he reacts to the ground at slow, medium, and high speed, because you can think better around an athlete when you see them perform in different speed contexts. So that's the first thing I will ask him to do, and because now we have that, I will film him slow-mo
Okay.
clearly in side and back and front, just to then, when he's not there anymore, check that slow motion thing and try to see a couple of, let's say, non-negotiables: contact
Okay.
time,
Yeah.
foot posture at touchdown, trunk, overall orientation, pelvic orientation, side-to-side movements from the back. You can narrow that first impression down to 10, 15 keys. And I guess if he's not fast, I hope these keys are not correctly into place. Because if if everything is great and he's not fast, then I would just try and have him play another number on the pitch, right?
That's what you said to me if I'd have come and asked you that question. Definitely do
Yeah.
something else.
You when you have a starter, you wish they have a bad technique overall, because that's going to make you a good coach.
Yeah.
That's going to be plenty of gains forward.
Absolutely.
Okay, but I've almost never seen a real starter with a perfect posture, perfect everything.
So, this is one that I didn't send over, but I think this may be a one that you probably got at the top of your head anyway. What would be? This is from Hakan Anderson.
Yeah.
What will be your perfect sprint study?
Oh, so that's pure spying.
Yes. Yes.
If Hakan is around, I just say hello. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that guy.
Yeah.
Wow, the ideal sprint study. That's going to be the next one with all these sensors telling us, solving the debate of is there isometric contractions here and there, solving the debate of what makes a stiff contact to the ground. That's going to be the ideal study, is a study where we can measure more microscopic things without touching the athlete or without just, and of course the ideal study will have 9.8 people to 11.8 people. So we have a clear view of what makes these and these different. Yeah. So
Cool.
in this nice study,
Yeah.
there's going to be a buy-in from the coaches, because we'll need them to allow us to measure their athletes.
Excellent. Right. I know we've got 10 minutes left, so I'm going to let you shoot at 7 at the latest. Are you happy for me to run through a few questions that have popped up on the screen, Jimmy?
Of course.
Okay. So thank you for all the questions. Been quite a few actually. So we've done.
So while you're looking, somebody
Yes.
just popped a message. The study I told you about in Nature is from Martin in 2018, and the name of the study is gouging force by tapping tendon. I love that title, because that's what they do. They just tap tendons, and they collect the frequency of vibration. And just like a guitar chord, the higher the frequency, the higher the tension on the structure. And they calibrated that so they can tell you, because your tendon vibrated this way, we can indirectly say the tension was that high. I just summarized a crazy paper in Nature.
In 10 seconds.
Yeah, they started, but that's what they do. They started with a pig tendon, so it was first in, let's say, in vitro, and they end up with a beautiful figure of an average Joe running on the treadmill with just that little sensor, and boom, you see the curves. You see the end of the swing phase. That's where the biceps fem is crazy tensed. It's beautiful.
Okay, so we've got one here. So do you profile athletes into springy tendon athletes and mechanically strong athletes?
It's not something I do in my research. It's not something I do, but it's something, yes, you can see. So I don't really like this two category approach, springy versus muscular,
Okay.
because it's not enough nuanced. So of course you can bucket them into springy and muscular, and I would be a springy guy, but
What about if you're neither like me?
yes, it's useful, but it's useful, but it's a very limited way to see things. But it's, as a first approach, it's useful. Then you can say, okay, we are going to try and improve the muscle side of the springy guy and vice versa, and see that everything. I think it's a good way to start. It's a good way to start. We have colleagues in Switzerland who validated. They call that terrestrial versus aerial athletes. Sorry. Why not? Why not? It always makes sense. But that's a qualitative first way to approach things. My
Okay,
job is
cool.
my job is most of the time to put quantities, to put numbers. So
Yeah. So that came from James. So thanks, mate. So Jack, any advice how you'd collect ground contact times and deep analysis in sprinting mechanics for team sports?
can you do that again?
Sorry,
How
mate.
do yeah.
Yep. Any advice on how you would collect ground contact times and get deeper analysis in sprint
Yeah.
mechanics for team sports?
Yeah, big, very important question, because from only contact time in sprinting, you can derive pretty accurately many things. You can derive the overall stiffness of the body, less accurately when it's super high speed, but the top sprinter is super high speed. So for team sport people, it's still okay. You can derive the movement of their center of mass. You can also derive with the two mass model of Ken Clark and Peter Weyand an idea of the overall stiffness approach. So the quality of their swing phase and punch onto the ground when at top speed. So then how do you do that? Right now, some wearables, some accelerometers do a pretty good job. But you have to be very careful about the validation studies versus the commercial, commercial informations.
White
So
papers or
I
whatever.
won't drop names, but you can do that now with accelerometry pretty well. You can do that, of course, with foot switches. If you just want the contact time and not the magnitude of the pressure, of the magnitude of the force, you can just go there with foot switches that cost almost nothing. We did that 10 years ago, and you have a beautiful boom contact time. You just need to wire them. You just need to collect data, but that's feasible. And I'm not very up to date with that, but I'm almost sure some companies do that kind of very easy sensors with Bluetooth system and all that stuff. When I did that 20 years ago in my PhD, we had the contact time under the insoles, and we had the signal going up to a box that was there because it was wired, and we had the signal going up to a backpack in which there was a PC recording under
Amazing.
DOS. That's my
Yeah.
old guy. That's my old guy anecdote. Everything was done
Amazing.
under DOS. There was no Bluetooth, micro
Yeah.
SD stuff. So yes, you can, but you should be able to have accurate things, because all the models you will use to calculate the outputs, they have big sensitivity on contact time. So if you do a 10% mistake on the measurement, you will have a 25-30% mistake error on the outcome. So this is big. Like when I see some analysis done from public TV footage images, now it's a contact time in sprinting is something that is 100 milliseconds around. You cannot be accurate for an event that is 100 milliseconds with a 20-30 frames per second. So yes, you need to be super accurate.
So last one, because I think this might take up us to the hour. So Des, Ryan, what would you use to profile change direction in team sports, and how would you compare the importance compared to sprint profiling?
I don't know, because right now the way well, of course, if you have all the instruments, if you have the force plates and everything, you can do crazy stuff. Martin himself has published some very interesting things where they had two radars and boom, boom, you have all the kinetics. But if you don't have this kind of device and you want to use the simple model we've published, you cannot do it in change of direction because the model is based on reaching your top speed from 0, which is not the context of COD. So for now, I would just rely on validated and accurate COD tests. Check the studies by Sophia and Infuse on that to pick your test that's the most accurate for your context.
Yep.
And go with that. You will just compare the performance outcome between COD and straight line sprinting. For now, there's no such profiling available, but I think some companies work on wearable systems to have instantaneous speed and maybe calculate, all our models are based on Newton's laws of motion in the forward direction of running. So all you need is instantaneous speed. So if one day you have instantaneous speed correctly as you move, then you can calculate the overall macroscopic acceleration of your body. Of course, it's not the entire power that you produce. It's only the power that you produce to move your center of mass forward. So we omit the stride to stride power changes. We omit the vertical power output, etc., etc. But we still have an information. I just want to share a quote I've read yesterday, and I've never read this one, and I saw that in a blog paper by Stuart Macmillan. That quote is huge. It says, "All models are wrong." It's true.
Yeah.
If you want to model nature and to model the human body moving, all models are wrong, but some are useful. So it means you have to deal with the accuracy error of a model and how useful it is in practice. And our philosophy with Pierre Samozino from the beginning, it's the one of our mentors, Prof. Di Prampero and so on, is, okay, there's inaccuracies in the model, but what's the magnitude of the accuracies compared to what's the possibilities allowed by your model? If that balance is huge, like you have 2, 3, 4% error in the model, fine, compared to gold standards, but you can do very interesting stuff and you can push things forward, go with it. I love this philosophy of perfection is the enemy of good. Perfect is the enemy of good. If you wait for perfect, then it's easy job. It's easy because, perfect never comes.
Yeah.
So you have to deal with mediocrity, let's say, to some extent, and go and move forward.
Yeah, so thanks, Des, for that question. So we're coming up to the hour, and I promised I have to keep you to the hour. So if anyone wants to get the question answered, because I know there's quite a few on there that we haven't been able to go through, can people jump on, drop you a direct message, JB? Is that right?
To me?
Yes.
Yes. So yes, but I will
Twitter
answer,
or Instagram. Or
so avoid Instagram and Facebook. I try to have only Twitter and emails.
Okay.
And it's
perfect.
way enough. So that's if some people listen here, I will very likely not respond on Instagram and Facebook Messenger. So
Okay.
Twitter and emails, and I might not respond to if it's a 2 hours discussion with papers, and I will respond within my possibilities.
Of course.